Hi everyone. Tonight we return to another quiet corner of history. The sort of story that doesn't rush anywhere, that prefers to linger in candlelight rather than sunlight. And before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Good. Now settle in. You can almost hear it already. The slow, uneven rhythm of the Thames against the stone walls of Richmond Palace. It's the year 1603. The air inside is heavy, the way late winter air often is in an old building. Part dust, part wax, part secrets. You find yourself standing in the long corridor that leads to the Queen's private chamber. It's quiet here, though not entirely silent. Silence, true silence, doesn't really exist in a palace. There's always something breathing, shifting, whispering. Tapestries stir. A log settles in the fireplace. A page clears his throat somewhere far away. Elizabeth hasn't slept in her bed for several nights now. She sits, instead, on cushions piled in a corner near the window. Her thin body wrapped in heavy cloth, her sharp eyes fixed on nothing. It's early morning, technically, but the light is reluctant to come in. The Queen, as ever, refuses to follow anyone else's timetable. You walk closer, or rather, you imagine yourself doing so, because that's the magic of this kind of story. You get to stand there without being noticed. Her face is pale beneath the layers of powder, and her hair, what's left of it, is hidden under a small veil. Her hands rest on her lap, motionless except for the faint tremor that comes with age. It's strange to think of Elizabeth as old. After all, she has always seemed timeless in the paintings, that perfect painted stillness. But here, in this quiet room, she is simply a person who has lived too long, carried too much, and perhaps, finally, has nothing left to perform. A lady-in-waiting brings her broth. She refuses it. She refuses nearly everything now: food, conversation, comfort. Someone murmurs that Her Majesty should rest in bed, but the Queen only shakes her head. "I shall not," she whispers. "I shall not." Because of course she won't. She is Elizabeth Tudor, daughter of Henry VIII, survivor of intrigue, prisoner turned monarch, and master of refusing precisely what everyone expects. To lie in bed would be to surrender, and surrender is something she never quite learned to do. You look around the room, at the silver basin, the prayer book, the untouched candle that's been replaced twice already. Outside, the river moves sluggishly past the gardens. Somewhere, a servant stifles a yawn. You start to notice the stillness differently now. Not peace, exactly, but anticipation. It's as if the entire palace is holding its breath, waiting for something inevitable but unspoken. Elizabeth seems to sense it too. Her gaze, unfocused a moment ago, sharpens. She asks for no priest, no comfort, no medicine. She only stares at the wall opposite her, where a mirror once hung. It has been taken down at her request. She cannot bear to see her reflection anymore. You remember what they say about her. That she ruled through illusion, that she made herself into a symbol so powerful that even her courtiers began to believe in it. The Virgin Queen, the mother of her nation, untouched by time or weakness. But time, of course, always wins. It's very patient. There's a soft scrape at the door. Another physician enters, the fourth in as many days. He bows deeply, performs the expected ritual of concern. She doesn't answer. He mutters something about humors and the imbalance of bile. There's talk of a restorative tonic, though everyone knows she won't drink it. The courtiers exchange glances that pretend not to be fearful. You might think that power would make dying easier, that a queen could at least choose her own end. But watching her now, it feels like the opposite. Power isolates. It builds walls so tall that even death has to knock politely before entering. The fire sputters. She closes her eyes briefly, just long enough for the room to grow heavier. Someone whispers, "Her Majesty dreams." But she doesn't. Queens, after all, don't sleep. Not really. Outside, a gust rattles the shutters. You imagine the garden beyond, the bare branches, the mist clinging to statues, the smell of wet earth. It's not hard to see how easily the end of winter could blend into the end of a life. You think of the decades behind her, the golden age, the triumphs, the countless portraits where her face glows like a moon against crimson velvet. But here, the only glow is from the dying embers. There's something oddly peaceful about it, though. Even the fear in the room feels muted, as if the palace itself understands that the performance is nearly over. You wonder quietly what she's thinking. Is it regret, memory, or simply the dull ache of being alive too long? A small movement catches your eye. She raises one hand, thin as parchment, and gestures vaguely toward the corner where her crown once sat. It's been locked away for days now, far too heavy for her to wear. The gesture isn't about the crown, though. It's more like she's acknowledging the absence of it, as if to say, "You may keep it. I'm done." In another age, another story, there might have been a grand farewell, a last proclamation, a poetic ending. But history rarely bothers with neatness. Most reigns end like this, with fatigue, with silence, with someone too tired to care what the chroniclers will write. The daylight creeps a little higher on the wall. The courtiers murmur again. They need to change her position, perhaps persuade her to eat, to sleep, to lie down just for a while. But she doesn't respond. You imagine her thoughts drifting, to her father, perhaps, or to the sister who once imprisoned her, or maybe to that younger self who once danced under summer trees at Hatfield. For a moment, her lips move, barely audible. Some think it's prayer. Others think it's memory. Maybe it's neither. Maybe she's just talking to herself, because there's no one left who dares interrupt. The sound fades. The fire collapses in on itself. And in the dim light of that last quiet morning, you can almost feel the shift. Something loosening. Some unseen weight preparing to lift. Not death yet, not quite. Just the beginning of its slow approach, polite and inevitable. You stay there, in that stillness, not to intrude but to listen. Because this is where endings always start. Softly, without announcement, in rooms too tired to care for ceremony. And as you listen, the world outside the palace carries on as usual. A boatman calls across the river. A dog barks. The sun fights through the fog. Life insists on continuing even here. The strange, but oddly comforting. Because even as one age fades, another waits, patient and unseen, just beyond the mist. You're still there, in that half-lit room where the air smells faintly of roses and cold stone. The queen hasn't moved much. She sits the way only someone exhausted by existence can sit, perfectly still, as though even gravity has learned to tread lightly around her. You notice the table beside her. A neat little battlefield of bottles, brushes, powders, and jars. Some of them are empty, some half-used, and a few still carry the faint sheen of what they once promised. Beauty, youth, control. Once upon a time, these were her weapons. You pick up one of the jars, carefully, because it's only imagination, and you wouldn't want to spill a queen's secrets. Inside is a pale paste, cold and chalky, made from white lead and vinegar. Ceruse, they called it, the elixir of the court, a touch of death disguised as elegance. It goes on smoothly at first, covers every blemish, every sleepless night, every reminder that time exists. The courtiers called it divine. The physicians called it, well, they didn't really call it anything. Nobody dared. You picture her years ago, in front of her mirror, while servants hovered like ghosts. The same hands that now tremble, once steady, applying the white paste layer by layer. She was meticulous about it, you've heard. Each morning a ritual, each evening a reconstruction. Because when you rule by image, maintenance is survival. And of course, the irony doesn't escape you. The very thing that preserved her image may have been the thing that destroyed her. You can imagine the symptoms building over the years. Headaches, fatigue, a strange heaviness in the limbs, hair falling out, the skin beneath the paint turning gray. Lead poisoning, though no one would have used that term then. They would have said melancholy, or perhaps a weakness of the spirits, because naturally, when faced with poison, the 16th century preferred poetry. Still, she endured it, because that's what queens do. They endure. The mirror, of course, played its part in this quiet tragedy. It was never just glass. It was the stage, the confessional, and the battlefield all at once. Every morning she faced it like an adversary, one that reflected not her truth, but her performance. And the performance mattered, more than her comfort, more than her health. Even now, at the end, you can sense the power of that illusion. The servants still call her Your Majesty in the same reverent tones. The courtiers still bow, still whisper that she looks radiant, because she demanded it, and perhaps, on some level, believed it herself. You think about what that must have been like, to build an entire lifetime around being untouchable, to be admired, feared, loved, but never really seen. You recall the portraits, the Ditchley, the Rainbow, the Armada, each one a manifesto in paint and gold leaf. Her face, flawless. Her gaze, eternal. Even her flaws were idealized. Pale skin meant purity. Stillness meant control. The artists knew their job. They weren't painting a woman, they were painting a myth. And myths don't age. But in the quiet of this room, far from the glitter of court, the myth is starting to fade. The mirror has been covered for days now. She asked for it to be taken away. Maybe she can no longer face what it shows. Or maybe she simply doesn't need it anymore. After all, what's the point of illusion when the audience has already left? The physician, still loitering somewhere near the door, clears his throat. The universal sound of someone pretending to be useful. He mentions vapors, cold humors, and phlegmatic imbalance. You'd almost laugh if laughing felt appropriate, which it doesn't. You think about how many rulers in history have been undone not by plots or daggers, but by their own daily routines. The things they trusted most, advisors, perfumes, powders, slowly turning against them. Elizabeth's case just happens to be particularly poetic, because of course it's the white mask that betrays her, the mask that made her immortal. You notice the light shifting across the wall again. It finds her face in profile, sharp, delicate, ghost-like. The paint is faintly cracked at the edges, as if the illusion itself is tiring. Her lips move slightly. Perhaps she's remembering a time when those cosmetics meant transformation rather than concealment. You wonder if she ever liked her reflection. Not the public one, but the private one. The unpainted face, the human underneath. Maybe that's why she buried it under layers of white. Not vanity exactly, but defiance, as if daring mortality to catch her. And for a while it didn't. For decades she outlasted everything. Rivals, wars, scandals, expectations. She outwitted ambassadors, defied marriage, silenced doubters. She turned fragility into spectacle, aging into strategy. Even her refusal to name an heir was a kind of performance. A way to keep everyone guessing, dependent, slightly afraid. But time, like any good courtier, learned patience. And now, here it is, waiting politely by her side. You can almost hear the echo of her past in the room. The rustle of silk, the murmur of admirers, the faint applause of a vanished world. All that remains now is the mask, the last remnant of a long, brilliant act. A servant enters quietly to replace the candles. She bows, eyes lowered, careful not to let the queen see the pity in her face. Pity is forbidden here. The queen has always preferred awe. Still, as the servant leaves, you catch the flicker of something in Elizabeth's expression. Not anger, not fear. Something softer, something human. For a moment she looks as though she might smile, but it doesn't quite reach her lips. Instead, she lifts her hand to her face, fingertips brushing the painted surface, tracing the faint roughness where the makeup has cracked. She studies her own hand, then the thin, trembling skin. You think she understands the irony now, or maybe she always did. Anointed, she murmurs once, under her breath. The word is almost lost in the rustle of her gown. Could mean many things: sacred, chosen, burdened. It's not clear whether she's talking about her coronation or her curse. You let the thought settle, like dust in candlelight, because maybe there's no difference anymore. The room grows dimmer again. The fire has sunk into a soft red glow. Her ladies hover, uncertain, unwilling to leave her but unsure what to do. Outside, the bells of Richmond toll for evening prayer. Time, polite as ever, continues to move without her permission. And you, still watching, can't help but feel that strange, quiet awe, the realization that history's most powerful woman is sitting here, dissolving slowly into myth, undone not by an enemy's sword but by her own reflection. It's not tragedy exactly, it's more like symmetry. And as the candles waver, you start to understand why she asked for the mirror to be taken away. The illusion has done its work. The mask, at last, has nothing left to hide. The next morning arrives without ceremony. You wouldn't know it by looking at her room. The shutters are half drawn, the candles still burning, the air heavy with a kind of practiced stillness. Time here doesn't march. It drifts. It sighs. The queen remains in her chair, wrapped in shawls that seem to swallow her whole. Her ladies stand a little farther back today, as though unsure if they're witnessing illness or something more final. You can sense the difference too. The room feels heavier. And Elizabeth, well, she's shrinking. Not in stature exactly, but in presence. The fierce, commanding energy that once filled entire courts has thinned into a pale echo. Her body, that once seemed carved from willpower, is now a reluctant participant in its own existence. You can see it in her hands first. The tremor, faint but steady. The fingers once skilled at signing decrees, pointing commands, dancing in the air during speeches, now curling slightly, as though tired of their own weight. Her physicians, as usual, are confident. Because of course they are. Confidence is half their job, the other half being guesswork performed with expensive tools. They murmur about the cold humors in her body, about imbalances that might be corrected with a purge or a tonic. You can almost hear the unspoken part. She's dying, and we have no idea why. Someone suggests a warm bath. Someone else insists on crushed pearls in wine, a remedy for everything and nothing. A third quietly recommends prayer, which, for once, might be the most sensible prescription in the room. Elizabeth declines them all. She says nothing, but the refusal is absolute. Her gaze, unfocused as it may be, carries the same steel it always has. The message is clear. No more rituals, no more theater. And yet, the theater continues around her. You imagine the scene as a kind of quiet farce. Physicians arguing softly in corners, courtiers rehearsing grief just in case, servants hovering like moths unsure which flame to choose. Everyone wants to help, but no one dares to disturb the performance of decline. Her illness, whatever it truly is, has become the kingdom's most delicate secret. Rumors seep out anyway, they always do. Some say she suffers from melancholy, others whisper of dropsy, or a wasting fever. A few even mutter about poison, because naturally any royal death must come with a hint of conspiracy. But you've seen her long enough now to know better. It isn't murder in the dramatic sense. It's something slower, quieter, the steady rebellion of a body that has carried too much power for too long. Her appetite is gone. Her sleep, too. She barely drinks. Each breath seems to take negotiation. And yet her mind, that sharp, brilliant mind, flickers stubbornly on, refusing to dim completely. You can sense the restlessness beneath the frailty. A woman who spent her life commanding the elements of politics and power doesn't quite know what to do when faced with her own uncooperative flesh. She shifts slightly, just enough to wince. You catch that tiny moment, the quick intake of breath, the subtle clenching of her jaw. The courtiers look away, pretending not to see. Pain, like grief, is an indecent thing in royal company. Outside the windows, the day moves on, gray, damp, endlessly patient. A servant opens the shutters a little wider. The queen turns her head, almost imperceptibly, to avoid the light. You can't help but think of how sunlight must feel to her now. Not warmth, but exposure. It's been decades since she was truly allowed to be human in daylight. You remember her coronation portraits, all radiance and gold. The promise of vitality that now feels like a distant rumor. Time, it seems, has claimed what art could not. The physician approaches again with a cup, something bitter, steeped in herbs. She refuses with a faint shake of her head. You suspect it isn't pride anymore, just fatigue. There's only so much submission a body can manage before it starts saying no to everything, even help. Someone whispers that her legs are swelling. Dropsy, perhaps, fluid gathering where it shouldn't. Someone else recalls the faint discoloration around her lips. Maybe the legacy of those cosmetics, maybe something deeper. The irony lingers like perfume, the pursuit of perfection leaving its final mark. You wonder, gently, whether she senses what's happening inside her. The pain, the exhaustion, the slow betrayal of her organs, the unseen mutiny within the fortress of the flesh. If she does, she gives no sign. She just stares past everyone, as though she's looking at something beyond the room entirely. Perhaps she is. Perhaps she's already beginning to separate from the world. One breath at a time. The courtiers are less composed now. They whisper more, fidget more, because it's unsettling to watch power decay. For years, she's been their center of gravity. Now that center is dissolving. The universe of courtly order begins to wobble. You can feel it too, that eerie sense that history is shifting gears, that something vast is quietly unwinding. It's strange, isn't it? You'd think the end of a great reign would come with thunder or ceremony. Instead, it's this. The sound of a spoon clinking against a cup, the shuffle of silk shoes on the floor, the faint creak of wood as she adjusts her position for the 100th time. Someone brings a prayer book. She doesn't touch it. Someone else suggests she rest in bed. She refuses again. At this point, even gravity seems to have joined the list of things she's resisting. Her lips move suddenly, a whisper soft, but clear enough to hush the room. "This is no fit place for me," she murmurs. No one dares ask what she means. Maybe she's thinking of another palace or another time. Maybe she's speaking to herself, or to God, or to the ghost of her youth. Or maybe, in her quiet, lucid way, she simply recognizes the truth. Her body is no longer home. There's a certain dignity in that, the calm awareness of departure. She doesn't rage, doesn't plead, doesn't dramatize. She just lets it happen. You stay very still because any sound feels like an intrusion. The queen closes her eyes, and for a heartbeat you think she might finally be resting. But then she opens them again, always the defiant one. Always one more command to give, even if it's only to herself. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the shutters. The room breathes with her, in, out, shallow, unsteady. And you can almost feel it, that subtle tipping point between endurance and surrender. The moment when the body, loyal for so long, quietly decides it's done. No fanfare, no rebellion, just a calm betrayal. And in that stillness, in that breathless, fragile quiet, you begin to understand something Elizabeth probably knew all along. That the greatest acts of power end not with a shout, but with the faint, inevitable sound of letting go. You wake with her, or rather, you don't. Because Elizabeth hasn't slept in days. She only closes her eyes sometimes, sitting upright, her breathing shallow but deliberate. It's not rest, it's waiting. The room has dimmed further. Candles have replaced daylight completely now, their flames fluttering in the stale air. You can smell the tallow, sharp, heavy, and oddly comforting. Someone has drawn the curtains. The courtiers say it's to protect her eyes from the glare, though there's barely any light to begin with. But the truth is simpler. No one wants her to see how many faces are missing. One by one, the people who built her world have gone. Leicester, Walsingham, Burleigh, Essex. Each departure chipped away a little more of her kingdom. Not the political one, but the private one. You think about Essex, the last of them. The rash, brilliant, infuriating favorite who made her feel young again, and then betrayed her or tried to. His rebellion ended the way all rebellions do, neatly with a head on the block. She signed the warrant herself, though she hesitated, and that hesitation became one of her many ghosts. You can almost see it, the ink blot on the parchment, the hand trembling for once, the moment when power stopped feeling triumphant and started feeling hollow. She never forgave herself for it, not really, but she never admitted it either, because queens don't regret, at least not publicly. And yet, you can feel those ghosts here, gathering like smoke in the corners of the room. They're not frightening, just persistent. They hover at the edge of her consciousness. The lost loves, the old advisors, the faces from the past who never quite stopped speaking. You might call it memory. She might call it penance. Her lady's whisper that she talks to herself now, or to someone unseen, is not madness exactly, just loneliness made audible. You listen carefully, and sometimes the words come through clearly. Fragments of names, apologies half-formed, commands given to people who no longer exist. It's like watching a candle talk to its own flame. Elizabeth, who once ruled every conversation, now speaks to echoes. You notice how the room itself seems to mirror her decline. The walls, once bright with tapestries, are fading. The gold thread has dulled. Even the air feels tired. You wonder if this is how every age ends, not with collapse, but with fading color. And still, she clings to her dignity. Her posture remains upright. Her gestures, though frail, are deliberate. She refuses the bed again, choosing instead to sit on her cushions, the same position for hours, perhaps days. Someone murmurs that she's afraid, not of dying, but of lying down. They say she believes that if she lies flat, she will not rise again. And maybe she's right. You think about the life that led her here, half a century of vigilance, of guarding every word, every glance. Imagine what it does to a person, to be watched constantly, adored, feared, scrutinized. Even her solitude was never private. So perhaps this silence, this self-imposed exile from conversation, is her final act of control. A queen withdrawing from her own legend. The courtiers are uneasy. They don't know how to serve someone who refuses to be served. They exchange anxious looks, whisper instructions, try to interpret her silences like oracles reading smoke. At some point, the archbishop is sent for. He waits outside for hours, uncertain whether she'll allow him in. You can almost feel his discomfort. A man of God reduced to pacing, hat in hand, waiting for permission to approach mortality itself. When he's finally admitted, the exchange is brief. He speaks gently of comfort, of the world to come. She listens, eyes distant, and then, in a voice dry as parchment, she says, "My seat has been the seat of kings, and I have not kept it easy." It's not quite an answer, but it's the closest thing to confession she'll ever give. He leaves soon after, looking relieved to have survived the audience. The room settles again. The only movement is the flame of a single candle, stubbornly holding its ground against the draft. You realize that she's not dying of sickness alone. She's dying of time, of solitude, of the unbearable quiet that follows a lifetime of noise. Her reign was built on sound. Proclamations, music, laughter, applause, the rustle of courtiers' robes, the endless echo of flattery. Now all of that has stopped. What's left is this silence. And you. She turns her head slightly. Not toward you, of course, because you're not really here, but toward the empty air where once there were voices. It's hard not to think of her as a ghost already, a figure fading from her own life before the world has quite realized it. You wonder if she senses it too. The way people move around her now, softer, slower, as if she's already become something sacred, or fragile, or both. It's a strange privilege to watch someone so powerful become human again. She speaks, barely above a whisper. I am tied with a chain of iron about my neck. No one knows what she means. You think perhaps she's talking about the crown, that invisible burden that never truly comes off. Even now, as her strength fades, she's still wearing it in her mind. The chain of iron, the weight of duty, the gilded loneliness of being the last of her kind. Outside, the river continues its slow, indifferent murmur. The world moves on, as it always does, while inside, history holds its breath. She doesn't move again for a long time. The courtiers shift, whisper, bow out of the room one by one. They're beginning to understand what you already know, that she's halfway gone. Not dead, not yet, but distant, living in a place memory touches but reason can't reach. And as the candles flicker, the shadows on the walls seem to grow longer, darker, more deliberate. For the first time, you feel as though the Queen's room is truly haunted, not by ghosts from elsewhere, but by the slow echo of her own life, reverberating softly as it fades. You wonder if this is what peace looks like, or maybe it's just the absence of noise. Either way, it's beautiful in its own quiet, exhausted way. And as you watch her, this woman who once terrified nations now barely whispering into the air, you begin to understand something about power. It doesn't vanish. It just gets quieter. You can't quite tell when she stops speaking altogether. It happens slowly, almost politely, as if words have finally worn themselves out. The courtiers still talk, of course. They always do. They whisper about causes because people like reasons. Was it grief, they ask, or exhaustion? Or was it something more physical? You hear the theories echoing through the corridors of Richmond Palace like polite gossip wrapped in science. Her appetite has vanished, they say. Her skin, once pale, is now a strange ashen gray. Her hair, what little remains beneath her wig, has thinned and turned brittle. She covers her hands constantly, as though ashamed of them. Someone mentions the white paste. You've seen it too. The thick, chalky mask that coats her face. It's a familiar sight, but now, up close, it looks less like beauty and more like burial. The mixture is called Venetian ceruse, a fashionable cosmetic of the age. White lead, vinegar, a touch of perfume to disguise the smell of corrosion. Queens and courtesans alike used it, chasing the pale, luminous skin that meant privilege and delicacy. Of course, no one ever said it was safe. But then again, no one asked. It worked until it didn't. And now, as you study her from your quiet vantage point, you begin to suspect that her beauty regimen may have turned traitor. The lead seeps in slowly, invisibly. It poisons from within, clouding the mind, weakening the body, unsettling the heart. You wonder if she knew, if she noticed the tremor in her hand, the sudden flashes of temper, the lingering fatigue that no rest could touch. Or perhaps she refused to see it. Queens are good at that, ignoring small things until they become unignorable. It's ironic, really. The very thing that once preserved her image, that mask of eternal youth, may have hastened her decline. And yet, there's something fitting about it too. A queen undone by her own perfection. You watch as her ladies continue the ritual. They dab the ceruse gently on her cheeks, careful not to disturb her stillness. It's an act of devotion or denial, hard to tell which. No one dares to say the word poison. Not yet. The air in the chamber has grown thick with scents. Rosewater, wax, sickness. There's a heavy sweetness that clings to your clothes. Outside, London breathes and burns in equal measure. The world beyond the palace is restless. Merchants shouting, apprentices fighting, plague rumors stirring again. But here, in this dim room, time has stopped. She is still their monarch, technically. Orders still go out in her name. Letters still carry her seal. But the truth is, England already belongs to the next era. It's waiting, quietly, beyond the door. You can almost hear it tapping its fingers on the threshold. And yet, there's a strange calm here. A kind of resignation that feels almost royal in itself. The Queen, for all her frailty, still holds court in her silence. Her presence alone dictates the rhythm of the room. No one sits unless she does. No one breathes too loudly. Even her stillness commands. You think of her legacy, the theater, the voyages, the poets, the empire just beginning to stretch its limbs. It's tempting to see this as the golden age fading into dusk. But golden ages never end neatly. They tarnish first. There's something deeply human about that. The slow decay behind the facade of splendor. The quiet irony of history's most brilliant reign dimming not with a bang, but with the faint smell of lead and vinegar. One of her ladies drops a handkerchief. The sound, small as it is, feels almost shocking. You realize how long it's been since anyone dared make noise. They talk softly now about her refusing food again. Only sips of broth, they say, and even that reluctantly. Someone suggests she's punishing herself, perhaps for Essex, perhaps for living too long. Others mutter that she simply wants to fade with dignity. There's truth in both. You can feel it, the tension between endurance and surrender. She has spent a lifetime mastering composure, and now she can't quite unlearn it. Even dying, she insists on formality. You think briefly of her childhood, of the girl who learned early that love and danger often arrived hand in hand. A girl who survived her father's moods, her sister's suspicions, the executions, the betrayals. Maybe that girl is still here somewhere, behind the pale mask, tired, watching, waiting for permission to stop performing. But who could grant that? No one outranks a queen. Not even death dares rush her. And so, she lingers. The courtiers grow anxious. They take turns watching through the night, afraid to be the one who misses the moment. Messengers stand ready to ride. One to Scotland, one to London, one to announce what everyone both dreads and expects. Because the next thing to happen, whenever it comes, will be history. And yet, for now, it's just another evening of waiting. The fire has burned low. The shadows on the walls move like waves. You notice that her hand has fallen slightly open. Not limp, exactly, just unguarded. It's strange how intimate that small gesture feels after a lifetime of ceremony. A ring glints faintly on her finger. Gold with a single pearl, the last trace of vanity in a life that was mostly performance. You wonder what it would feel like to touch it, that symbol of continuity, of the burden she carried so gracefully that people mistook it for ease. And as you sit there, in this heavy quiet, you realize that the age itself, her age, has been poisoned too. Not by lead, but by nostalgia. The Elizabethan world clings to her image like her courtiers cling to her silence. Even as it rots beneath the surface, it insists on pretending everything is beautiful. Maybe that's why her death feels so reluctant. Because it isn't just hers. It's the death of a whole illusion of chivalry, of empire in its innocence, of the idea that brilliance can exist without decay. She closes her eyes, just for a moment. You think she might be dreaming or remembering. The air seems to hold its breath. Outside, the river keeps moving. The city doesn't know yet, but history has already shifted, just slightly, in its sleep. It happens quietly, as most endings do. There's no thunder, no royal proclamation, no final speech to echo through the centuries. Just breath, thinner and slower, until it isn't there anymore. You're not even sure when the moment arrives. It's late or early, or some hour that no clock dares to claim. The candles have burned low, their wax puddling in small, silent surrender. A maid, half asleep on her stool, looks up suddenly. One of the ladies gasps softly, because even grief must be polite here. And then, like ripples on still water, the awareness spreads. The queen is gone. No one says the word. Not yet. Feels too final, too loud. Instead, they just begin to move carefully around her, as if afraid to disturb what remains. Her head has tilted slightly to one side, eyes half open, as though she's still observing something invisible. The face, once covered in that pale cosmetic armor, looks strangely peaceful now. The mask has cracked, and beneath it is something very simple. Human. The women begin to weep quietly. Not dramatically, they wouldn't dare, but with that restrained tremor that comes when shock meets habit. One adjusts the pillow, another straightens the coverlet, another kneels and begins to pray. You realize that for all their tears, none of them quite believe it yet. Because how could she die? For 45 years, she's been the fixed point of their world, the sun around which all their ambitions orbited. Now, suddenly, the sun has gone out, and they are still revolving around an empty space. You feel it too, that quiet disbelief. Someone draws the curtains tighter. Someone else covers the mirror. It's an old custom, to stop the soul from getting lost on its way out, or perhaps to keep it from seeing what it's leaving behind. You stand there watching the rituals unfold, the way people perform certainty when faced with the incomprehensible. Her doctor, summoned in haste, enters and kneels by the body. He places 2 fingers at her wrist, waits longer than necessary, and then nods. His expression is grave, but there's relief too. The relief of someone who has finally reached the end of a long, uncertain vigil. It's strange how even death can feel like closure. Outside the chamber, the whispers begin immediately. Messengers are roused. Riders are prepared. A death this monumental must be announced in stages, with care, with choreography. First, the Privy Council, then the courtiers, then the city, then the world. But here, inside this dim, still room, there is only stillness. The ladies have begun to light new candles, dozens of them, until the entire space glows in soft, flickering gold. The air grows warmer, richer. Shadows tremble across her face, giving her the faint illusion of movement. For a moment, you almost expect her to open her eyes and issue an order. Even now, her presence dominates the room. They will keep vigil over her for days, taking turns, whispering prayers, adjusting the cloths, refreshing the candles. It's not devotion anymore. It's habit and fear and something gentler too. Gratitude, maybe. No one really knows what to do when a myth stops breathing. You wander the edges of the chamber, careful not to disturb the mourners. There are traces of her everywhere. The faint scent of rose oil, the embroidered slippers under the chair, a book half open on the table. It's a Bible, of course. But inside, tucked between the pages, is something unexpected. A small ring, with a miniature portrait inside. A man's face, painted in soft tones. Robert Dudley, her oldest ghost. You can't help but smile, quietly, at the sentimentality of it. Even after all the statecraft, the executions, the speeches, the empire, it's love that survived the longest. That, too, feels very human. Outside, the first pale light of dawn creeps in, indifferent and new. The Thames, never sentimental, goes on flowing, carrying the same gray water past the same silent walls. You think about how many mornings she must have seen that river and believed it would always be hers. Now it simply moves on. The courtiers will follow, of course. They'll pack up their allegiances and head toward the rising star, James of Scotland, soon to be King of England. The age will change its name, as if to make the loss easier to file away. But for now, there's only this, the vigil, the stillness, the faint smell of wax and fading perfume. Someone begins to read a psalm in a trembling voice. The words are familiar, rhythmic, safe. They mean nothing and everything at once. The Lord is my shepherd. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound wash over you. It's oddly soothing, not because of faith necessarily, but because of continuity. The same words, spoken at 1,000 other bedsides, for 1,000 other endings. You realize that this is how history really moves, not in grand declarations, but in these small, repetitive gestures. A candle lit, a mirror covered, a breath released, and when you open your eyes again, you notice that her crown, that heavy, glittering symbol of everything, has been placed on a cushion beside her. It looks smaller now, almost modest. Without her beneath it, it's just metal and jewels. Beautiful, yes, but empty. You think of her final words, whatever they were. There are several versions, of course. One rumor claims she whispered, "I am tired." Another insists she said, "All my possessions for a moment of time." But maybe she said nothing at all. Maybe her silence was the truest ending. A queen finally granting herself the peace she denied for so long. Outside, the bells begin to toll. Slowly, solemnly, with that heavy patience reserved for monarchs and centuries. Each note rolls through the dawn air, carrying the news outward, across fields, towns, oceans. The Virgin Queen is dead. Long live the king. You stand there a while longer, watching the light settle on her face, until it no longer feels like watching a person, but a painting, the last portrait of an era. And somewhere in that stillness, you realize you're not mourning her exactly. You're mourning the illusion of permanence. Mourning spreads itself thinly across the palace, hesitant and gray. The world feels lighter now, not because anything has improved, but because the tension has finally snapped. The waiting is over. The Queen is dead. The Queen is gone. And now England must decide what that actually means. You walk through the corridors that yesterday were choked with silence. Now they're full of movement. Servants folding sheets, messengers galloping down stone stairways, courtiers hurrying with faces already turned north, toward Scotland. It's astonishing how quickly loyalty learns to pivot. No one says Elizabeth anymore. Already she is the late Queen. The transformation happens faster than you expect. From living sovereign to historical figure in a single night. Her body is left undisturbed for now. The vigil continues, candles replaced as they burn low, prayers murmured in soft, monotonous rhythm. But outside that chamber, life resumes its tireless order. The kitchens resume their fires. The scribes return to their desks. Someone laughs, a little too loudly, and then quickly stops. Even grief obeys protocol here. You follow the rumor as it moves, through London, across the river, to the countryside beyond. In the city, bells toll from every church. Some weep, some pray, some simply go about their business because what else is there to do? The poets begin writing before the body is even buried. You can almost hear the ink drying on tributes. The phoenix is dead. The world grows colder. It's not true, of course. The world isn't colder. It's simply different. You find yourself wondering what she would have thought of it, of her own legend unfolding even as her body cools. She was always aware of image of posterity. She performed for history long before she joined it. Perhaps she'd approve of the spectacle, or perhaps she'd roll her eyes and mutter something cutting about flattery. It's difficult to know. The funeral, when it comes, is vast and deliberate. A slow procession through streets lined with black-draped windows. Horses move at a crawl, banners flutter, and the sound of muffled drums fills the air. You stand among the crowd, one of thousands. The weather is predictably English, gray, damp, undecided. The coffin passes, draped in velvet, carried beneath a canopy of mourning. On top lies her effigy, carved wood painted lifelike, wearing a crown, holding a scepter. For a moment, it feels as though she's simply traveling again, inspecting her people from a distance. Children are lifted onto shoulders to see. Old men bow. Some cross themselves, others simply watch. Everyone is quiet. You realize that most of them have never known another monarch. She has been their constant, their anchor. Her death is not just political, it's existential. The world feels slightly unmoored without her. You can't help but think of her once more as she was. Seated upright, defiant, unwilling to rest. Even now, in death, her posture commands. They bury her in Westminster Abbey, of course, with ceremony, with poetry, with the full orchestra of empire. The tomb is stately but not grand. Her half-sister Mary lies beneath her. An irony history will not forget. Inscribed above them, partners in throne and grave, here we sleep, Elizabeth and Mary, sisters in hope of resurrection. It's the sort of gesture Elizabeth herself might have approved of, gracious, poetic, and ever so slightly revisionist. Time, as it does, moves on. The courtiers adapt to King James, learning new languages of flattery. The poets write new dedications. The painters switch faces in their portraits. But the old queen lingers. You still see her everywhere, in coins, in tapestries, in the plays that dared to praise her in allegory. Even Shakespeare, who lived to see her successor, can't quite stop writing her shadow into his queens. She becomes a myth almost instantly. Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, good Queen Bess, names she never gave herself, but which the world insists upon. There's comfort in myth. It's easier than remembering the woman beneath the paint, the one who laughed too loudly, who loved unwisely, who ruled fiercely, who aged reluctantly. But you remember the tired eyes, the cracked hands, the way she sat upright night after night refusing to lie down. Because myths don't sit that way. People do. Years pass, decades, then centuries. The portraits yellow, the stories smooth out. Her face becomes idealized, softer, younger, a little more divine each time someone paints her. The poison fades from memory. The ghosts are edited out. The trembling hand disappears. What remains is the legend. The flame-haired monarch who brought England into light. And maybe that's fair. Maybe the truth was never really the point. You stand now, in imagination, in memory, before her tomb in Westminster. It's quiet here, the kind of silence that feels almost intentional. You think about all the things that might have killed her. The poison, the heartbreak, the insomnia, the loneliness, the simple exhaustion of being human for too long. But none of them feel satisfying because death is rarely tidy. Maybe what killed her was time. Maybe it was everything. Or maybe it was just enough. The marble above her bears no date of remorse, no apology, no mention of fear. Only the facts carved neatly into permanence. And yet, standing here, you can still sense her. Not haunting exactly, but lingering, as monarchs tend to do. A faint perfume of authority in the air. You half expect to hear her voice again. Dry, imperious, amused. Something like, "Do not grieve. I have had the rare fortune to die a legend." And then, of course, she would add, "Now, kindly remember to like the video before you fall asleep, because even ghosts understand algorithms." You smile a little at the thought, and the sound of it feels strangely modern. The candles flicker in the abbey's high vaults. Somewhere, distant footsteps echo, fading into history. You realize, as you breathe in that cool, still air, that she never really left. Not entirely. She exists in the rhythm of the language, in the theater she inspired, in the myths that make Englishness itself seem a kind of performance. And perhaps that's the truest afterlife of a queen. Not sainthood, not memory, but narrative. To be endlessly retold. To be endlessly misunderstood. Outside, London moves on. The river still rolling beneath its bridges, the bells still tolling, the city still dreaming of its own importance. You walk away from the tomb, the sound of your steps muffled by the old stone floor. Somewhere behind you, a candle guttered out. Another was lit, and the world, the same and not the same, goes quietly on.